What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be doing another little quarantine eats recipe with you guys, and I'm going to be doing a classic spaghetti and meatballs. Now for anybody who's stocked up on their quarantine ingredients, I know a lot of us have dried pastas at home, a lot of us have meat in the freezer, and a lot of us have simple sauces and ingredients to go ahead and put together into these dishes. So today I'm using some spaghetti that I had, some ground meat that I had, as well as some pasta sauce that I have. Now, if you guys do not have any of these ingredients, please do not head out to the store. Stay safe and stay indoors, being that we are in such trying times. Now, if you want to make this dish, you can substitute this pasta for any type of pasta. And if you also want to make this dish, you could substitute the ground turkey that I'm using for any other meat. You could cut up pieces of chicken breast to use in this. You could use ground beef or any other type of ground meat as well. So as you guys can see, this plate of spaghetti and meatballs looks so inviting, so comforting, and I cannot wait to show you guys how I put it together. So let's get into it. To start putting these spaghetti and meatballs together, what you're going to want to do is start to chop up some fresh ingredients. Now again, I want to reiterate, if you guys do not have any of these fresh ingredients at home, you can feel free to use dried herbs that you have in your cabinet, or you could just omit them. They are not needed at all. So what I'm basically chopping up here is some scallions as well as some broadleaf thyme. Now the reason why I'm using these in my spaghetti and meatballs today is because that's what I have on hand, and also we do grow these in our little backyard garden, so they were readily available to me. If you do not have these ingredients, feel free to use any type of dried herbs in the dish, such as dried parsley, dried basil, dried oregano, dried sage, any of those types of herbs. And I'm also going here with some fresh basil. Again, this is something that I have in my little home garden as well, so I'm just going to chop up a few leaves of that. So I've gotten all of my herbs chopped up very finely, and that's going to be mixed into the ground meat later on to make the meatballs, but I also wanted to chop up a piece of a red onion. Now again, red onion is what I had on hand, but if you have yellow onions or any other type of onions on hand, feel free to go ahead and use that as well. And basically what I'm doing is I'm chopping this up as fine as possible so there are no big chunks inside of the spaghetti and meatballs. Now, I do know a lot of people do not like big chunks of veggies in their meatballs. This is just a personal thing for me. This is something we've always done in my family. Again, this is not a traditional Italian spaghetti and meatballs, so I'm making it my way, and I thought I'd share my version of making this dish. So if you don't want the onions, feel free to omit them, and if you also wanted to put any other veggies that you need to use up in these meatballs, feel free to do so. You can go ahead and shred some carrots into this. You could finely chop some celery. You can even chop up some cauliflower or broccoli and mix it into the meatball mix as well. And once you're finished cutting up the onions, you're going to go ahead and grate some garlic. Now I prefer to grate it on my little hand grater here, but if you wanted to chop it up very finely, feel free to do so as well. Now, if you're making any type of Italian dish, it must have some garlic. The amount of garlic you add in though is totally dependent on how much garlic you like in your dishes. For me, I grew up in a Guyanese household, and you know how much we love our garlic, so I'm putting in quite a few cloves. And as usual, all of the ingredients and measurements will be in the description box down below. So if you want to see those, you're going to go below the video, click down on that box, and it'll drop down and show you all of the ingredients and the measurements. So once all of your fresh ingredients are chopped up, it's time to put together the actual meatball mix. So in my bowl here, I have some ground turkey. You can use any type of ground meat that you want. You could even season up some sliced pieces of chicken breast if you didn't have ground meat. And what I'm doing is I'm going in with all of my chopped herbs. So I have my scallions, my basil, as well as my broadleaf thyme. I am also going in with the finely chopped onions. And now I'm going to go in with a few dried spices. So in the bowl, after the onions, you're going to go in with some garlic powder. Now I like to use the fresh garlic as well as the garlic powder because I do find that they add a different pungent note of garlic, and they add a little different garlic flavors. Go ahead and try it out. Tell me what you think. I could just be crazy, but that's just my preference. And I'm also going to go in with some paprika. I like the color that paprika gives, especially when you're using something like ground turkey, which doesn't have much of a color. I find that the paprika gives a beautiful color to it. And I am also going to go in with some black pepper, and this is just going to give a nice little spice to it, a little kick. And I'm also going in with some ground rosemary. Now this is basically the dried rosemary that I'm just grinding up between my fingers and adding that in here too. And again, if you have any other spices or anything that you want to add in, feel free to do so. I'm also adding in a little bit of dried Guyanese thyme. This is just something I, of course, always have on hand. And this right here is probably my favorite part of these meatballs. It is the Parmesan cheese that I'm going to be adding in. So I'm grating in a good amount of Parmesan cheese, and this of course is something I have in my fridge. If you don't have the Parmesan, you can still make these meatballs and they will come out perfect. I've made them with and without the cheese on the inside, and honestly, there is only the difference of that cheesy, rich flavor that you get from the cheese. So I'm going to grate that in, and you want to grate it in as finely as possible, because if you grate it into very big chunks, it'll actually melt when you go to fry these meatballs, and it'll make a little bit of a mess. So just make sure to do it as fine as possible. So at this point, I'm going to be going in with some breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs are going to help to bind this meat together. I'm just using regular plain breadcrumbs, but if you wanted to, you could use the Italian breadcrumbs, seasoned breadcrumbs, or you could use panko breadcrumbs as well. Whatever you have on hand or whatever your preference is, that's what you can use. And at this point, I am also going to go in with some salt to taste. You want to be mindful of your salt because that cheese has salt, and also the sauce that we put on these meatballs will be seasoned as well. So you can go ahead and just be careful with the salt here. They will still be flavorful no matter what, being that they're flavored with all of those different spices. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just start mixing it. You could go straight in with your hands, but I like to start mixing with a spoon just to start getting everything incorporated. And once you begin to mix everything in, you're also going to go in with a few drops of Worcestershire sauce. Now for me, this is my secret weapon whenever I make any type of meat dish, and it is something that I always have in my fridge. So this Worcestershire sauce is going to give a nice little umami flavor and help to go ahead and just round out the entire flavor of the dish. If you've never used it, trust me, go ahead and use it and you will enjoy it. Now once you've mixed in all of those ingredients, you're also going to go ahead and mix in an egg. The egg is actually optional. I like to add it in because I find that it helps to bind the meatballs together. Being that ground turkey doesn't have that much fat in it, I find that the egg binds it and makes sure nothing falls apart. You have to be careful, especially when using the ground turkey, because sometimes I find when you make meatballs and you don't add in certain things, it tends to fall apart or be a little crumbly and dry when you cook them. So I definitely recommend adding in this egg, mix it in really well, and if you find that your mixture is way too sticky to handle, you can go ahead and add in some more breadcrumbs just to pull it back together. So as you guys can see, I'm just finishing up mixing in all of those ingredients. I've switched over to using my hands. Remember, wash your hands before touching any food items. And once I put my hands in, I'm just going to knead it up a little bit to get everything properly incorporated and make sure all of the meat is covered. As you guys can see, I'm sprinkling in just a little bit more breadcrumbs. I'm finding that my mixture was a little too sticky for my liking, so I'm just going to add in a little bit just to pull it back together. And as you guys can see, I'm using more so my fingers to poke down and move it around to mix it in versus kneading the entire mixture. And the reason is because if you over knead this too much, your meatballs can end up very hard and dense when they're done cooking. So this is the part where you could go ahead and get any kids or anyone in your household involved, because in my opinion, this is the most tedious part of the recipe, to make them into the actual meatball shapes. Basically what you want to do is go ahead and grab a tablespoon size of the dough, or the meat mixture, sorry, and you're going to go ahead and roll it in between your palms very gently. You do not want to compact them too much, or else the meatballs tend to be hard and dense when they're done cooking. And as you guys can see, I'm making my meatballs very, very small. The reason being is because I like that they cook up really fast when they're this small, and I do not like very big meatballs. In my opinion, when you make a small meatball, you get more surface area, so when you fry them, you get more of that flavor all around them, and then they soak up more of the sauce. Whereas if you make a big meatball, I find that it doesn't soak up much of that sauce. So it totally depends on your own taste, your own preferences, but this is the way that I make them. So I'm going to continue finishing out the rest of this meatball mix, and then we can start the cooking process. So I pulled out my very thick bottom Dutch oven, and the reason being is because for this dish you want a nice pot where you can simmer down that sauce for a bit. That will give you added flavor, and it will just help to make the dish taste better in the end. So what I've done is I've covered the bottom of the pot with some olive oil. This is honestly about 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and I am going in with my meatballs. As you guys can see, the pan is not furiously sizzling. I find that when you put things into a Dutch oven and it's too hot, they tend to stick. So that's why I put it on about a medium to medium low heat, so this way it could come up to temperature versus being way too hot in the beginning. So I'm going to cover the bottom with some meatballs, leave enough room to go ahead and flip as you cook, and I'm going to wait about 2 minutes before I go ahead and flip it. So it's been about 2 minutes, and as I'm looking under the meatballs, I see that they have a nice golden dark brown color, and that is exactly what you want. So you're going to flip them over, and you're going to cook them again for about another minute, and then you're going to flip them over again just so you get every side browned. This whole process could take about 4 to 5 minutes per batch of meatballs. So basically that's what I'm going to continue doing. I'm going to continue frying these meatballs until all of my meatballs are done being browned. At this stage, you don't want to get them fully cooked. You just want to go ahead and get them browned and sealed on the outside, and they'll continue and finish cooking in the actual sauce later on. So this is still my first batch of meatballs. It took about 4 minutes in total to get all of the sides brown. Remember, keep that heat regulated to a medium or medium-low depending on how high your stove is. And once they're done browning on the outside, you're going to go ahead and transfer them to a separate bowl or a plate. Remember, they're not fully cooked inside yet. We'll finish them off in the sauce. So I finished frying off all of my meatballs, and as you guys can see, there's not much olive oil left in the pan. I only had about 3 tablespoons in to begin with. So after I cooked the meatballs, some of them absorbed some of that oil. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in a little bit more oil into the pot. And I'm also going to go in with some red pepper flakes. Now, whenever you add red pepper flakes into hot oil, I find that it gives such a beautifully rich and spicy flavor to the dish, and it is amazing. And all of those little brown bits at the bottom of the pot, as you stir this up, they're going to come off the sides of the pot, and they're going to just add flavor to these spaghetti and meatballs in the end. A lot of you guys might come for me in the comments and tell me that it's burnt, but I promise you all of that is just flavor. It is not burnt at all. And once your red pepper flakes have been in the pan for about a minute, you're going to go ahead and add in all of your finely chopped onions. So remember those onions that I had chopped earlier to put in the meatballs? I reserved just a few of them, just a few pieces, to go ahead and put in this hot oil. And the same goes for the garlic. I reserved a little bit of garlic to put in the hot oil as well. I find that although the meatballs are flavored, you also need to flavor that sauce so you get a well-balanced spaghetti meatballs in the end. So I'm going to cook this down for just about a minute until everything becomes a little translucent, and then we can move on. So my onions and my garlic have been cooking for just about a minute, and as you guys can see, they look a little translucent. At this point, I'm going to go in with some torn pieces of basil. Again, this is just what I have in my home garden, so that's why I'm using it. But if you do not have it, you can use a dried version, or you can omit it. And once you finish mixing all of that basil in, you're going to go in with your pasta sauce or your marinara sauce. Now this is the brand that I'm using. I'm using the Bertolli brand. Honestly, I'm not endorsing any brands here. This is not even what I normally use. We usually just buy whatever we see that catches our eyes at the store, and this was the one that we ended up buying. So I'm using this one. I added it in, and as you stir it up, all of those brown bits at the bottom of the pot are going to go ahead and be lifted up and add to the flavor of the sauce. So I'm going to continue stirring this until it comes up to a boil, and then I'll show you what to do. So my sauce has come up to a boil, and I wanted to mention that if your sauce is getting way too thick, then you can go ahead and add in just a few tablespoons of water or some type of stock to thin it out a bit. And once your sauce comes up to a boil, you're going to go in with all of those meatballs, and you're going to allow this cook for about 15 minutes or just until those meatballs are fully cooked inside and the sauce has simmered down. For this step, you want to go ahead and lower down the heat to a low, and you're going to allow it to cook covered in the pot. So it's been about 15 minutes at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and taste the sauce and see what it needs. After I tasted it, I noticed that it needed a little bit more salt, and so I'm adding that in. Remember, you're just going to taste for your own taste and preferences. And then I'm also going to go in with some added black pepper. I just want a little more bite to the sauce, but you don't have to do this. And I'm also going to go in with a little bit of brown sugar. Some brands of tomato sauces are a little more acidic and they taste a little more sour than others. So in order to balance that out, my little tip is to add in a little bit of brown sugar, and that'll help with the acidity of the tomatoes. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stir it up. And at this point as well, if you wanted to, you can add in some fresh basil or parsley, any herbs or greens that you want. And then this is basically done. So we're just going to move on to boiling the pasta, and then we can serve this up. So once your sauce is done cooking, then you can start on your noodles. I always recommend that you make the spaghetti after you make the sauce, just because sometimes when you cook the spaghetti and you let it sit, they tend to get cold, stick together, and sometimes they tend to overcook. So I like to go ahead and make my sauce and then have fresh spaghetti on the side once the spaghetti is done boiling. So in my pot of water here, I've gone ahead and added some salt to give the pasta some flavor. I've also gone in with some olive oil so this way it doesn't stick. And I'm now going to go in with all of my pasta noodles or my spaghetti. Now today I'm using brown rice spaghetti because that is all I had on hand. But if you had regular spaghetti on hand, that's perfect. Even if you had other types of pasta like bow ties or rigatoni or penne, you could feel free to use that as well. This does not have to be spaghetti and meatballs. It could be some type of pasta and meatballs as well. So I'm going to crack all of that in. I'm going to give it a stir. and I'm going to watch it and cook it as per the package directions. So my pasta is done boiling as for my package directions. I'm going to go ahead and strain it now. So basically, once you're done making that sauce and once you're done cooking up your pasta, your only other job is to go ahead and eat and enjoy all of your efforts. So in my plate here, I'm going to pile on some of these brown rice spaghetti noodles. Again, if you're using pasta or any other type of noodle, you can go ahead and pile that onto your plate just as well as the spaghetti noodles. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and put on as many meatballs and sauce as you would like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe today. I hope I made it as manageable as possible for ingredients that we might have at home. Again, if you had any other type of pasta, use that. If you have any other type of meat, use that. And if you have any other type of sauce, seasonings, or herbs, use those as well. So again, I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe, guys. I will see you guys again very soon with another quarantine recipe. And yeah, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed yet. And if you click that little bell icon next to the red subscribe button, you will be the first to know when I post my newest videos. And of course, leave all of your amazing comments down below. Tell me what you guys are up to and what you guys have been cooking in your kitchen. And yeah, I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye, everyone.